Gentlemen, as you all know, several years ago, with the appointment of Romanov's new chief advisor, a man known only as Yuri, our relationships with the Russian deteriorated. Today, our worst fears have been confirmed. The Soviets have risen against us, and their forces are approaching the United States from all sides. Our peacekeeper missile network has failed due to causes unknown. The Russians are attempting to cross over the Potomac and strike at the Pentagon in order to cripple our military leadership. We are in dire situations, Commander. We need to act fast if we want to live in a better world.
Hostile contact!
Enemy side coming out everywhere!
Yeah! Medic!
We're pinned down!
This is taking fire!
I can't take anymore!
Ow! We're getting blasted! Kill the bastard!
With the destruction of the peacekeeper silos, the drums of war thunder once again. Keen on dealing a decisive first blow, Russia began their offensive with attacks on the US East Coast, with Washington, D.C. and New York City being their first targets. Unprepared to deal with such a sudden invasion, the Allied forces found themselves in a bind, as they had to simultaneously evacuate the local civilians and establish a temporary defense line. Many of their armed forces are scattered around the country and won't be in position to reinforce the local defenders in time, with the Russians traveling through the Potomac River mere moments away from shore. The Pentagon had no choice but to assign one of their young field commanders to the defense of the city. Commonly referred to as the Allied Commander, little is known about his past due to his intel being classified, but his expertise is shown in this battle, as he managed to fend off the overwhelming Russian numbers with only a small contingent of forces at his disposal, ensuring the survival of the heart of the American military. But the Allies aren't the only ones with a prodigy among them. As a test of skill, Russia had assigned their newest top graduate from their elite military academy to oversee the attack on New York City. Despite his relatively new debut on the battlefield, his raw talent had already landed him the rank of Soviet general, and many refer to him as such. Even with the assistance of Special Agent Tanya, the regional defenders were unable to prevail against the Soviet general, resulting in the destruction of the Statue of Liberty and the subsequent conquering of the entire city, dealing a massive blow to the American morale, though the victory was not without sacrifice, as Boris, hero of Mother Russia, gave his life in the battle.
That's suspicious.
Since the powerful American Pacific Fleet is out of position at this time, the Russian forces began launching attacks on the west coast as well, including the assault on San Francisco. Normally, the Californian State Fleet and the US Coast Guards would be more than enough to handle the invasion, but the Russian forces here are once again led by the Soviet general. With his skills, the attackers swiftly dismantled the grand cannons guarding the shorelines and easily punched through the defense force. The ease of this victory allowed the invaders to push further into the country and capture the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. This not only crippled the American aerial capabilities in the area, but also gave the Soviets access to the blueprints of the American state-of-the-art Stormchild jet, which they began studying meticulously. The bad news didn't end there for the Allies, as the Soviet general back in San Francisco had discovered secret intel in one of the destroyed American bases, indicating that President Dugin is currently hiding in Texas. He did not act on this information immediately, and simply passed it along to the Russian High Command, as he was busy clearing out the Alcatraz island, per request of Chief Advisor Yuri, who insisted that the Soviet general personally oversee this operation, as the prisoners kept on this island are crucial subjects for a science experiment of his. Normally, Yuri would not trust such a task to an outsider, but he didn't really have a choice at the moment due to his second-in-command being occupied in Europe. Speaking of which, as Yuri had foreseen, the Euro alliance refused to come to America's defense at the start of the Third Great War, fearful of the Russian Bears' retaliation on their home turf. Likewise, the Pacific Front, a new allied coalition that was just recently formed out of fear of China's rising powers, turned a blind eye to the turmoils of their former protectorate. Their inaction leaves America stranded and alone in defense of itself, making it that much easier for the invading Russians. This, however, inadvertently meant that Russia had enough manpower to spare on a secondary campaign into Western Europe, a textbook example of self-fulfilling prophecy. After the end of the last war, many former Soviet republics had elected to either exit the Union or join the Allies instead. The Russian High Command, long bittered by the defection and riding high after their recent success, seized the weakness shown by the European countries and began spreading the flames of war into their former territories. The Central Asian republics that were once part of the Soviet Union were swiftly taken by Russia, but it's a different story with Ukraine and the Baltic states, who had formed defensive pacts with the US and the Euro alliance. Their defense partners may have their hands tied at the moment, but years of military and technological aid meant that taking them would not be an easy fight. To advance into Eastern Europe, the Russians decided to breach through the Verik Pass with a substantial number of armored divisions. The area is well fortified, however, with several artillery installations in ideal positions along the pass. To add oil to fire, the Russian commanding officer assigned to this mission is relatively inexperienced, ordering the tank columns under his command to charge blindly through the enemy defenses. To save the Russians from such a foolhardy maneuver, Yuri had to send the proselyte, along with a small task force, to their aid. The success of this mission isn't really a big deal for Yuri, but it is to the Russian High Command, who had long criticized the needlessly excessive independence and funding of the Psi Corps. If the destruction of the Peacekeeper silos wasn't enough, then the completion of this mission will surely sway their opinions and prove that the Psi Corps is indeed worthy of the resources poured into it. Using the mind-altering powers to his advantage once again, the proselyte managed to capture the artillery bunkers guarding the pass, and used them against their former masters. With it, the Russians successfully broke through the choke point with minimal losses, and are poised to invade the rest of Eastern Europe.
Wow, thanks Yuri, your boys really came in clutch for us there. Maybe the Psi Corps really is invaluable to us.
But of course, my good comrades, surely you see now that my abilities are vital to your cause. There is no need to distrust us. The Psi Corps and I are and will continue to be your trusty allies.
With the renewal of the High Command's trust in him, Yuri spots a chance to evade the scrutinizing attention of the higher-ups and begins making moves to secure his own objectives. He ordered his followers to steal a Stalin's Fist, Russia's proprietary mobile war factory, and brought it to Cairo, Egypt, where they met up with a man Yuri had long been searching for.
I have been waiting for this day.
Known only as Rashidi, this man is not only a master of engineering and biochemistry, but also the leader of an African terrorist organization known as Scorpion Cell. After the devastations of the last Great War, the Euro Alliance retracted their forces from their African colonies in order to recuperate. This power vacuum was seized by the Americans, who swiftly moved into the region and began siphoning its natural resources for their own use. Discontent with the Western influence on the continent, a war of resistance began against the Americans, which eventually led to the creation of the Scorpion Cell. Despite its humble origin, the cell's resistance efforts were greatly aided by Rashidi's inventions, such as the Stinger, a prototype walker armed with acid sprayers and repair tools, and the Mantis, a shoddy battle tank cobbled together using smart polymers and cheap nanofibers. Even with Rashidi's ingenuity, however, the cell simply could not mount an effective offensive against the Americans due to their lack of resources. This is where Yuri comes in. Like Rashidi, Yuri is in desperate need of mobile construction technology to help bolster his forces. And because of his lack of access to the complete Soviet weapons protocol, his only alternative is to create his own version of it, which he can't do without an exceptionally skilled engineer like Rashidi. At first, Yuri thought of simply mind-controlling him and his forces, but Rashidi seems to be aware of the Psi Corps' manipulative powers and has protected himself from such with unknown drugs and numerous assassins. As such, Yuri had no choice but to properly negotiate with him. Using the stolen Stalin's Fist as a bargaining chip, Yuri struck a deal with Rashidi. If he pledges to aid in removing the American presence on the continent, Rashidi will return the favor by using his skills to help Yuri conceive his very own military arsenal, independent from Soviet and Allied designs. To secure the assistance of the Scorpion Cell, Yuri assigned the proselyte as the commanding officer to this meeting. Upon inspection, Rashidi was amazed by the Stalin's Fist's design, and he wasted no time to begin studying the machine. In the meantime, the proselyte led a small group of forces to the nearby American oil derricks and overtook their operation, albeit with minor resistance.
You have fucking crossed the line.
With ample funding secured from the oil derricks, the proselyte used the Stalin's Fist to construct an army of tanks and used them to level the American embassy building in Cairo. This marks the beginning of the Americans' waning grasp on the African continent and the start of a beautiful partnership between the Psi Corps and the Scorpion Cell. Back to America. Aside from Washington, D.C., the Russian invasion has been going pretty smoothly thus far, netting them huge chunks of American territory. With this added safety, the Russians authorized the construction of one of Yuri's new inventions, a delicate device known as Psychic Beacon, using New York City and its remaining resistance force as a testing ground for its powers. The US isn't sitting around doing nothing either. After successfully defending the Pentagon, the Allied commander was sent to retake the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. With the help of Special Agent Tanya, They managed to liberate the academy and subsequently routed the Russian forces in the area, giving the Americans a shot at regaining their air superiority. Although the dismantled Stormchild jets found in the Russian camp confirmed their suspicion that the Soviets are looking to re-establish their air force. That is a concern for another day. For now, another matter had to be resolved. Seeing the success of their Russian comrades, the Latin Confederation joins the war and commences their own attacks against the United States. With the bulk of the American armored forces busy battling Russian tank divisions, the US-Mexico border was left relatively undefended. Jumping onto this opportunity, the Confederation forces attempt a ground invasion through the Mexican border, targeting a particularly weak checkpoint with only a handful of National Guards stationed there. Fortunately, the Allied commander is summoned here with the Stormchild jets he retook from the Soviets. Without air superiority, the Confederate forces were unable to break through the defenses and retreated temporarily, buying the Americans precious time to focus their attention on the Russians. Unwilling to back down just yet, the Latin Confederation launches several more attacks by sea and, with the help of the Russian colonels Krukov and Reznov, successfully conquer many West Coast cities, including Seattle and Los Angeles. Furthermore, an American naval base in Mayport, Florida had fallen to the Russians, robbing the US Atlantic Fleet of a key supply route and severely limiting their marine activities along the East Coast. In response, the Americans diverted a portion of their forces and managed to retake Los Angeles, driving the local Confederation forces back into the sea. The Mayport Naval Yard in Florida was also retaken, once again thanks to the combined efforts of the Allied commander and Tanya, who rescued a group of rocketeers right before their execution and used them to retake the Port Authority building, allowing the Allies to regain a degree of naval presence in the East Coast. The war had been back and forth thus far, but the Russian High Command knows this will not last. Unlike their initial prediction, the core of the American industrial complex resides not within the coastal regions, but the interior heartlands. The Soviets' pace have been slowed down since the start of the war, and in a few days, the American assembly line will soon produce a new batch of advanced equipment, just in time for the training of the first wave of US volunteers to be completed. This could be the decisive edge America needs to swing the conflict back in their favor. In their haste to retake their lost territories, however, the Americans have spread their troops thin. Too thin, it seems, as a contingent of Confederation forces had finally managed to break through the already undermanned US-Mexico border, tearing their way towards the city of San Antonio, where the American President Dugan is held up, as indicated by the intel obtained in San Francisco. The Confederation encircled the Alamo and began pummeling the defenders with their white phosphorus weapons. Unsure if they can hold off the attackers, the Americans decided to evacuate the president through the only airfield remaining in the area. Unbeknownst to them, the Confederation's elite commando, Morales, already lay in wait at the airport.
Get me out of here! You don't want the vice president running the country, do you?
I miss my girl, but I won't miss you!
The assassination of President Michael Dugan dealt yet another crippling blow to the American morale. With their enemy's chain of command temporarily disrupted, the Soviet Union renews its offensive vigor, pushing deeper into the US interior regions. Yet even so, the American resistance continued strong, still clinging on to hope that the winds of war will shift in their favor. They have no idea what fate has in store for them next.